good to go. Hi everyone, my name is Craig Barr from Autodesk. I'm a technical marketing specialist. I work with Chris Murray if you were here for his Max talk. Today what I'm going to be covering are certain areas within Maya. Daryl, my coworker, tomorrow, if you're interested in the other parts of Maya that I'm not going to cover today, he's going to take care of those as well. So we're going to talk about Autodesk Maya 2015, and we're going to look at some interesting new things. If you were here for the Max talk, Chris mentioned our 2015 extension release for Max, and I'm going to cover some of that for Maya here as well. Most of what I'm going to be taking a look at here today are, is related to the modeling workflows within Maya 2015, as well as anything that relates to the extension release I'll highlight along the way. So just a quick agenda in here. We're going to take a look at the benefits of subscription. Subscription customers get access to the extension releases, and we're going to go through some polygonal modeling workflows. We're going to look at some kind of hands-on, quick, simple modeling that we can do very quickly now in Maya with a few simple tools from the modeling toolkit. And then as well, we'll get into Boolean improvements. The Boolean tools within Maya have improved greatly. We'll take a look at how that works and the different options available now and there. And we're going to look at the kind of Autodesk retopology story, the different options available, and we're going to focus primarily on the Maya tools available that allow that to happen. And then we'll focus on some of the new enhancements to the UV tool set, and we'll look at how Viewport 2.0 can really allow your models to come to life now in the awesome Maya viewport. We keep adding more and more to that. It keeps becoming more and more powerful and robust. And in doing so, we'll look at some of the different new color management options that we have available within Maya 2015 extension release. So just really quickly here, I want to take a look at what subscription is, and then we'll just go through a couple slides really quickly of what is available in the Maya 2015 extension release. So subscription, we have 3 ways to subscribe. And the basics of that, and with our subscription, we have maintenance, desktop, and cloud. And maintenance is going to provide you with all of the latest upgrades, latest updates, and premium support. Desktop, providing you with flexibility in the way that you pay, whether you're working on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. And of course, our cloud service offering, so that you're able to work on the cloud, take advantage of infinite computing power, collaborating with others with your work as well. So really quickly, I'm not going to go through all of these different points. If you want more information on this, Daryl and myself will put up a couple of videos related to the Maya 2015 extension release that you'll see this week. You'll hear a lot more about this week as well. I'm just going to highlight a couple of key points as we go along here. So we have over 37 enhancements in the extension release. Some of the key factors here. We've added this great new cloud import-export tool within Maya, which allows you to collaborate with the cloud and other operations out there so that you can actually live from your signed-in account access things like Autodesk A360, 123D, and the 123D apps, things that you've done outside of Maya and saved through those apps on the cloud. And we've integrated Dropbox as well into Maya, which a lot of people have been asking for, which is great. A great way to share your data or collaborate with data on the go as well. And we're going to have this awesome one-click game data exchange that's available. We'll touch on that a little bit later. And at the bottom there, this profiler tool, which allows or enables artists to see what might be bogging down a scene and be able to quickly debug anything that's kind of holding down your scene. So within the modeling area there, Open Subdivision, if you're a Maya user, you know we've implemented this for some time now, and we keep adding more and more to it. As well, Alembic, we've added the ability to write creases and support that across with caching. And in the modeling toolkit updates, this is a big focus for us with Maya, is adding more and more features and enhancements and power to that modeling toolkit. And we're going to look at all of those tools in there as well and how they work within a Maya workflow. Bifrost, I'm not going to be touching on that today, but just to point out that we now support PRT files from your Bifrost workflows, as well as XGen. Just pointing out a couple things. We're not going to get into XGen in this session here, but soft select and the new shader node groups that are available as well. We're going to touch upon some of the new viewport rendering effects in here. So things like color management preferences and live Viewport 2.0 controls with exposure, gamma, different effects in there that can really bring your scene to life. And then as well, another key point there, Maya Hardware 2.0, you can actually write out OpenEXR format as well. In the end, we're going to look at some retopology options in here. And so just very quickly, traditional poly modeling ways to address a mesh that may be too dense or may need a whole remeshing and retopology because of the geometry that it's composed of. And then we can look at poly reduction tools. We have a very fast, powerful tool now in Maya that we will dive into shortly here. And another side of the retopology story, of course, if you're familiar with Mudbox, is this automatic, computed, or guided retopology, which will allow you to have another way of working with retopology. All of these solutions here are solutions on their own, but they work great combined together. It's actually a great way to work between Mudbox and Maya to combine all of these different things. And we're going to look at specifically here within Maya, the Maya Quadra tool, and how that can help with your manual retopology workflows. The last area that we're going to look at with the retopology story in there is this idea of data exchange and how we've integrated cloud solutions within Maya. As I pointed out there earlier, we have a couple of different interesting ways that we can work with data from outside of Maya live within Maya very quickly, very powerfully. So let's jump into Maya. What I wanted to start with right away was just some simple kind of traditional modeling using the new modeling toolkit within Maya 2015. So if you're not familiar with the modeling toolkit, here, this is first of all, I should point out, this is our Hyperspace Madness scene. This is a short that we're building within Autodesk. Our main lead character there, Sven. There's a spaceship, and there's one of his little enemy trilobots that's always trying to take him down, take him out. So we're going to look at modeling, or how we can quickly model up the hood or top head on this trilobot robot here. So the modeling toolkit, I can activate that in a couple of ways. The easiest way is the icon on the top right corner of the UI. And this brings in our modeling toolkit UI as well. And you can see that right up. It's actually quite simple in the way that it's laid out. We have all our tools down here under the mesh editing tool. It's nice and light. Few tools that are very powerful. So we're combining efforts of tools into simple tools as we go. So let's start with this simple little piece of geometry. All that is just a simple shell, nothing fancy at all going on in here. I'm going to take a look at the multi-cut tool. The multi-cut tool is a very powerful tool in the way that it allows you to do several different things within the polygonal workflow. One of the things I want to look at is this slice effect. So if we're working away with this piece of geometry and I want to shape the hood or the fairing on this helmet of this robot, I can do a couple of things. I can slice or add in geometry very quickly, of course, just by dragging that across. But if I want to quickly cut and blow away areas in there, I can just simply, under the slice tool options, do delete faces in there. And then by doing that, I'm going to get this little perpendicular indicator that is showing me the side that I'm going to blow away. So we can just quickly do that and drag through here. I'm going to get rid of this and maybe cut this section down so that we're going to build kind of more of a sharpened kind of claw effect on there. As well, you'll notice right below the multi-cut tool, we have this target weld tool. The nice thing about the target weld tool and all of the other tools within Maya 2015's modeling toolkit is that you will see that the multi-component is by default always highlighted. And the great thing about this multi-component workflow is that we're able to take advantage of faces, edges, verts, live, and combine them together. So in this case here, I want to take a look at the target weld. And I should point out that with the extension release, we've actually combined a couple of tools into one. So the target weld now going forward replaces the merge edge tool and the merge vertex tool. So that target weld, you can work with either edges or verts. So in this case here, if I want to just work with simple verts, I can just grab my and drag it to the location that I want to do that. By default, the target weld options are going to target. I actually had that one on center. Let's do that one again here. We'll keep that on target. And then you'll see that I get this unique little highlighting feature. That is something that is part of the whole toolkit, this ability to highlight or pre-visualize before you commit. With everything that we do in here, we're always hovering over and highlighting or previewing what it is that we're going to work with before we commit. So we're seeing a couple of different ways that we can preview or work with this as we go. So let's take a look at something else here with the multi-cut tool. If I jump into, are we doing a mic swap here? Okay, I'm going to just keep talking loud while we do this. How about that? I wondered, I went in the washroom earlier, and I don't know if you guys heard it, so it must have, something was wrong. Okay, sorry about that. So multi-cut, we're going to take a look at a different way that we can work with multi-cut. So we saw the simple ability of this slice or this insert or adding an edge and then blowing away faces. We can also extract faces with the multi-cut tool. But in here, we can start to simply click and drag anywhere. I can click anywhere along an edge, anywhere along a vert, and I can arbitrarily start to draw within the viewport on faces. And then if I hold down keys like Shift, for example, it's going to lock and snap constrain to the middle of whatever edge or component I'm working with there. And the nice thing about this, you'll see that I'm not committing to anything at the time here. It's not that I'm non-committal. It's just that I like to preview and get a good taste of what it is I'm working with here before I commit to something. So in this case here, I can take the components and begin to work with them and move them around, translate them around, and actually snap them as well off of areas that I've snapped to. So for example, this vert here that we're seeing, that we're previewing, that I've snapped to in the middle of that, if I remove that and drag that out, we're going to get an orange vertex to show me that that's how it's going to cut that edge across as we go. So just to show that, and then if I hit enter, of course, it's going to commit to that. I don't want to do that. I want to do something useful here that I can actually get a nice clean cut to add some detailing in the back of this fairing or this hood on this robot. So I'm just going to shift click on these edges here. And then what we can also do, if I hold down Control Shift, and this is exclusive into the extension release, we're getting into this nice little kind of protractor that comes out to show me that it's working with 90-degree angles or perpendicular cuts that it's going to allow me to do to cut across. So it's very useful for getting nice kind of accurate cuts. And if I just kind of put that one across, and we'll just cut this guy across this way. And then if I exit the tool, I'm immediately back in my multi-component mode. And this is really nice so that I can just quickly grab some of these faces and remove them from, I wanted to have this nice cut in the scene. Using the multi-cut tool, I've left this kind of n-gon in here. So if I just hit my Y key, it actually reactivates the last tool I was working with within the modeling toolkit there. So now I can just address this and just simply snap in and commit to that by pressing enter so that we're providing two nice quads in the back of that there as well. So let's get out of this one here. Now, I've been working on just the side of a simple piece of geometry. And then what I'm going to do with this, of course, is just mirror it over. But it'd be nice to work with the different options that are available for symmetry within Maya. So if we take this one here, I'm just going to go underneath my mesh tool. We'll use mirror geometry, bring up the options. I want to go in positive X direction. So we'll simply mirror that and bring that over. And you'll see that I had selected in there to merge the vertices with the other component, and it's done that. If I hit 3, which is my smooth mesh preview, it's a good way, a good tip actually, to always see how things are merging. You can immediately see if you have unwelded or unmerged vertices or components when you're hitting 3. You'll see that I have a couple of edges that I didn't bring close enough in here, but not a problem. With the target weld tool, we saw how we were using vertices to get rid of any kind of issues by merging or combining those verts. I'm going to put the target weld options to center, and I'm going to grab my target weld tool and just kind of draw it across there. So you see that orange preview with a green highlight as to where it's going to meet in the middle. And the nice thing again about this target weld tool, it's working with all these different components. So I'm merging edges and I'm merging verts if I want to. So now we can switch back to verts. And now we've solved that little issue in there, and we have our nice, clean, simple little piece of geometry. So let's move forward with this and take a look at some of the other tools. So because I'm in the multi-component mode here, I can grab a face and just double-click on that and grab the entire shell. Double-clicking on a component will grab the entire shell, for example, with faces. If I double-click on an edge, I'm going to grab that edge loop. We can also do this with edge rings. We also have selection constraints that we'll take a look at here in a moment. But right now with the faces, I want to take a look at the extrusion tool and how that works within the modeling toolkit. You'll notice that a lot of the operations have a reset button on the bottom. And that is there because we will leave the history of your last command in these tools. So as you'll see in a moment, I'm going to dial in or just kind of bring this hood or fairing up a little bit to provide a little thickness, and then maybe we'll bring in a little bit of an offset. Yeah, we'll push a little bit of an offset out on that. That's fine. And then once I get out of that tool, when we come back to extrude, we're going to see that those settings that I've used have remained in there. And that's a good thing, because if I want to continue that operation there, I can keep repeating with my exact settings that I've had in there. If I don't want to do it, I can just hit reset and continue on. So let's move on with this piece of geometry here. I want to work with this symmetrically. So right now you can see that I'm highlighting the components as I work, but they're in red. I'm not getting any good symmetrical workflow. Well, a simple way to do that, I'm just going to click an edge, and then I'm going to select Control-Shift, right-click, and I'm going to select topology, and that'll automatically enable symmetry. And I'm using topological symmetry on here. This is kind of a hard surface model that we're working with, but just a key point here on the topology symmetry option. This is excellent for organic sculpts or models. If you have something that is very asymmetrical, completely different side or shape, but the topology overall is the same, this will still allow you to work symmetrically even though the mesh is asymmetrical in shape. So let's do a couple of different things in here. I want to work with these components and get them symmetrical onto the other side. I'm just going to work with some of these simple edges in here. We'll quickly skew these guys. So just kind of pull them. We're going to add some detailing into the top. And now, because I'm in multi-component mode, of course, I can just grab faces and work with that. Let's go to our Extrusion tool, and remember, it's going to do the last setting that I had. I don't want that in this case, so I'll just hit reset. And I want to do a simple little offset into there. So we can bring that little, whoops, just keep those guys highlighted and go back to our extrusion. I want to push this in, so I'm just going to push this guy down into there. And then what we can do with, I'll exit out of that tool, we're going to grab some of these edge loops around those details that we're working with and then hit bevel. And I'm simply going to dial in an offset, a fractional offset, and dial in how I want that bevel to be. And of course, if I wanted more segments to kind of tighten or smoothen out or round out this edge, I can simply do that as well. So let's leave it like this. And then if we hit Smooth Mesh Preview, we'll see that we're starting to get some of the kind of nice effects that we're going for. So lastly, really quickly, let's take a look at how we can, we'll just exit out of that tool there, work with faces symmetrically. If I hit the B hotkey, that's going to bring me into Soft Select. We can pull any of these kind of areas out. I can grab any of these components and start to work with them rather quickly to kind of reshape or remodel or modify how I want this overall hood or model to look for this character here. So we've taken a look at some of the modeling toolkit tools, and I've just used a couple of simple tools in there because they combine all of these different powers or features within them. So what I want to do now is move on to some of the other modeling workflows here within Maya. Let's move away from our little Trilobot guy, and let's take a look at Sven ship. And just really quickly, let's take a look at some of the Boolean options available. I should point out here, when you're working with Maya, we've always had the ability to address or adjust the way your mesh appears within the viewport, specific to the wireframe. But we've now added, due to customer request, the ability underneath the display menu here, we have this wireframe color. And this is going to bring up kind of a floating menu that'll stay there. We've always had index. But now with RGB, what that's going to allow me to do, I'll just overlay my wireframe on top of this. And I can start to kind of visualize my assets by visual cue here by providing colored wireframe on this. And the nice thing about this is that we can go by RGB. We have our color picker in here. I can actually even grab colors from the viewport if I wanted that specific to my wireframe as well, and then we can apply and commit that. So something from a lot of the people coming from the soft image community, a lot of Max users moving over to Maya. This is a workflow that they like to work with, and we've now got this, we have this fully integrated in here so that it's very simple to adjust how your geometry looks within the viewport. So I'm going to grab this nose cone here on Sven ship, and I'm just going to display a couple of simple little objects here just to show what we're talking with Booleans. If I go underneath my mesh menu, I'll go to Booleans and I'll select difference. Now, we'll get into the difference between edge and normal in a second. I'm just going to hit edge and just chop that nose off a little bit. Let's move this simple little cylinder and just begin to kind of reposition or modify how we want this ship to look. So we've just very quickly modeled that in. Now, it's key to note that the gray from those default primitives has carried over here. And that's because we have that option within working with Booleans within Maya to not just Boolean your surface or cut your surface, but actually translate the texture data to a model. So think about that for a moment. You can actually change the geometry but affect the overall texture maps with a simple Boolean operation all in one go. So for example, I'm going to grab this hull on here. I have all these little missiles, and we talked about the difference between edge and normal with the new Boolean system here. If I put normal on, this is going to give me a nice, clean, simple trim, right? So very nice if I want just holes in there. I want to do a cut into there, so if I go back to edge and hit apply, you'll see now that those little missiles, the textures, have actually come right over into that ship. So we're not just affecting the geometry very quickly in the way that we model, we're affecting the texture here as well, if we want to. We have the choice to not do it that way if we don't want the texture to affect it. And then of course, being a texture, we can modify that very easily. So there is the simple, fast, powerful Boolean way. All of this, of course, is stored in the history. I can go back and start to rotate or transform or scale any of these things that I've done in here. So let's move on to some of the other ways that we can work with geometry, or this getting into this kind of retopology story now. I talked about polyreduce within Maya when I was showing some of the slides earlier. You know, we have different ways to work with reduction of polygons. We replaced the polyreduce tool a little while ago here within Maya because we needed something that was more powerful, more robust, and something that I could go back in the history and adjust if I wasn't happy with the overall result. For example here, if I want to reduce this by 90%, I'll just hit apply. And you'll see now that we're actually getting a very clean, preserving the volume, preserving the shape, retopology, or and I'm just going to have to speak loud is what I'll keep doing here. And then if we go into the polyreduce, you'll see that that percentage is held within there. So if I hit 95 onto here, I can just quickly dial that in, and I can actually dial that back and forth within the viewport if I really wanted to as well. So we've seen polyreduction on this piece of geometry in here. We can kind of align that, make sure that we're within line of the other wing, which looks fine. Let's take a look at another way that we can work with geometry that might be less than favorable within a modeling workflow. So quite often we can work with geometry from other sources, right? It might come from outside of Maya, it might come from some other package, it might be scan data, it might be something that is coming in, it serves the purpose of its shape, maybe even its texture, but the geometry is not in favor to a production. You know, ultimately in a production we want nice clean geometry, of course, as we all know if you've been in production. That doesn't happen most of the time. So it's always good to have these tools to have nice clean geometry to make your workflow more efficient here. One of the ways that we can work with this within the modeling toolkit, just to point out, this geometry is a mix of triangles. We have some quads going on in there. We have some n-gons. There might even be overlapping vertices and edges. I don't know. At this point, I just want to address that and quickly fix it. So we're going to hit the quad draw tool. What we want to do, and this is actually a really simple way that we've implemented this, if I select the piece of geometry that I want to use the quad draw tool on, and I hit the little magnet. You know, what's funny about this is that we had a different way to do this in the modeling toolkit when we first announced it, and then we eventually changed this back, bringing back the magnet, right? So any long-time hardcore Maya users know that our make live thing is now once again, it's come back as a hero within Maya, which is kind of funny. So by hitting the quad draw tool, I can go in and begin to just draw or drop down simple little dots. And again, this whole idea of the modeling toolkit is all about preview and adjust before I commit. So I'm simply dropping down these dots. I'm drawing in where I want my quads to go. And the cool thing about this is I can just drop them down quickly. I don't need to really focus or care much about if it's straight or the resolution of it, because I can really quickly dial up the resolution or dial it down if I want to as well, and address, you know, straightening out any of these areas. At any time when working with the quad draw tool, you just saw I was holding down the shift key, not the shit key, the shift key, and filling in quads as I went, working with this to draw in my quads. And I can grab any of the components and tweak those by middle clicking. So in this case here, maybe I want to straighten out that edge or those vertices. I can also grab faces. We're always working with all of the different components, which is a really quick, it's one of those things you don't really think of much, but when you're working in modeling, the old way of switching between faces and then edges and verts, that's actually really time consuming. So always working with all of the components within the modeling toolkit is a very powerful way to work. So we're looking at this way of dropping down simple dots, then shift, previewing how that polygon's going to be, and then clicking to commit. So this idea of always previewing before you commit, And I could remesh this surface by simply dropping down my dots, hitting shift and building out the geometry as I go. And then of course, if I hold down my control key, I can drop in and quickly remesh that surface really quickly. So let's look at a different way to work with the quad draw tool. I'm going to leave our little ship and Sven there for a moment. And we're going to come over to some of these features. This is an interesting story here. Some of these features that you see in the Hyperspace Madness scene, all of these columns, these towers, this is all recap data. These are real towers that exist, and we actually used drones and helicopters and shot these and used reality capture to produce the mesh, the textures, and then retopo them to bring them into a usable production asset and bring them into this scene that we have here in Maya. Well, this piece of geometry here that we're going to look at is actually an example of that. But if I click on that and just highlight it, you'll notice it's actually extremely dense. But I'm able to, in the Maya viewport, tumble around really fast and work with it. This little piece of geometry here, as you can see in the display, is at 3.2 million polys. I say that loosely because it's coming in from scan or reality capture data. I know that this isn't going to be clean quads. It's not even going to be clean tris necessarily. It might be a mix of n-gons and quads and tris and overlapping verts and unwelded verts, holes, things that are not conducive to a good modeling workflow. But we can address this really quickly now within Maya. And here's a couple of ways that are really key within the extension release that I think are amazing for this modeling workflow. So a couple of things that we're doing here. If I had this piece of geometry in the Maya scene, I'd be able to tumble around and work with it, but it really kind of bogged things down. That's a pretty dense mesh. The way I'm working with this mesh is that, I'm going to turn that live surface off. The way I'm working with this mesh is I mentioned earlier this data exchange. So now underneath the file menu, I have these highlighted in green and these new features. Just very quickly, this data exchange idea. With the extension release, we now have the ability to send to Unity. So if you're a game developer, you'll love this. You can grab the whole scene, unlimited poly count, send that right over to Unity. Send a selection in Unity, set your Unity project right from within Maya here. As well, send to Unreal. So if you're a game developer and you work within the Unreal Engine environment, we have the same capabilities. The other cool thing about this is you're sitting there going, well, I don't work with Unity or Unreal. Don't start throwing the cabbage yet. That's at the back room. They hid it before you came in. We have this game exporter down here below. So if you're working with a different game engine, not Unity, not Unreal, this is really cool. If I click on that, you'll see that I can grab a mesh, I can grab animation data, and I can work with specifics as to what my game engine or my environment might support or may not support. So I can go in here and toggle on and off what it is that I need, whether it's skinning on a mesh, blend shapes, could even be cameras, and of course animation clips. And I can define what path I want to send this to my game workflow. As well, if you're not familiar with FBX Review, you should check that out. You can grab it, download it free, preview all of your animations, even models, within a simple little viewport that you can tumble around. If I toggle that on, it'll automatically launch that and let me see what those assets look like before I've committed to the game. So with this data exchange story, you'll see at the bottom now, we have this cloud import-export window. And the excellent thing about this cloud import-export, we don't have internet in this room, so I'm not logged in here, but I can log into my A360 account. That's where I store a lot of my reality capture data. I do a lot of stuff with the reality capture team, and I can grab all of this now live from the cloud and bring it right into Maya and work with it. Also 123D, if you're familiar with 123D Sculpt or Creature, some of the consumer apps outside of Maya, I can access all of those as well. And then Dropbox, so I can grab files and share them in here. I can import and export. This goes both ways as well. So that's what I'm simply doing here. I'm actually taking this data, I'm bringing it from the cloud, but then the other key thing, remember I talked about how dense that can be for tumbling around within the viewport. We want to make sure that we can work with that mesh or that data. And we have this handy little pipeline cache menu. You see under there, we have an Alembic cache, and we have a GPU cache. I want to offload all of that load, all of that mesh data to my GPU, to my hardware, so that I can work with this rapidly within Maya. And that's all I've done here. I've simply taken the original mesh, untouched, brought it into Maya, and then I've gone to export selected, and I've exported it as an Alembic format, so that I'm actually using the .abc format. And now in Maya, I'm reading in the GPU format. That's what this is. This is a GPU cache, so it allows me to work with it really quickly. I can start to remesh or remodel this. So let's do that. If I grab my mesh and I go back to our little magnet, make it live, And now we'll use quad draw, but we're going to use quad draw in a bit of a different way this time. So we talked about how we can work with this mesh data. If I wanted to start to really quickly remesh this data, I can start to draw those dots out one by one, but there's a lot of detail in here. I want to be quicker on that. I want to work faster. I can hold down the tab key, and if I start to drag this around, you can see a little face that's sticking to that surface because we've made that live. But if I hold down, while I'm holding down tab, I'm going to hold down the middle click, and I'm going to adjust the size of that. And right now I'm going to block in, so I don't really care about how dense or how detailed it's getting right now, but I'm simply dragging and drawing these quad strips. So instead of just placing down dots one by one, because I have this big piece of geometry, this big face on here, I want to make sure that I'm really rapidly remeshing that surface. And now that I have this quad strip on here, this is kind of cool. What I can do is I can select my edge loops that I want to work with in here. So another way that we can simply work with this, if I just hold down my tab key here, I can get to my extend tool, and I'm going to use extend, instead of extend edge, I'm just going to right click over here to extend loop, and grab my tab is going to highlight that entire edge loop. And now if I grab that and just drag that right across the surface, it's going to snap in. Well, of course, that's pretty low res. We don't have a lot of geometry in there, but that's the cool thing about the quad draw tool is now I can just start snapping this in, and you'll see that it's live shrinking or fitting to that surface. And now as I'm dropping this, because it's so low res, it's kind of crunching in. So we're not getting, you know, the best fitting to this yet because we're just blocking this simply in. But at any time, as I'm adding this, it's adding more detail, of course, to the mesh. But at any time, this is kind of nice. If I hold down the Shift key, I can access Relax now. So I can actually go in here and just kind of relax that mesh. I can also hit the B key to access soft selection. So now you see that I'm getting that soft selection preview before I commit to anything. Hold down Shift, and this really rapidly kind of, it's almost stress relieving, you know, you just kind of dial that in, you know, let it fit to the surface, relax. I'm getting too involved in that. Let's leave that here for a moment. So now we can dial that mesh that we've quickly remeshed. I could take this further, I could make it more dense, but everything I'm adding to it is always sticking to that live surface. So with GPU cache, with the cloud integration that we've seen within the extension release, this is an excellent way to bring data in and work with huge data sets really quickly within Maya. So let's turn this guy off here actually, and just to show that we'll turn off our make live. I'm just going to get rid of that guy. And this was just another really quick, this is a simple low-res piece of geometry that's bringing over the original texture there as well that I'm using in here. And then you can simply do that by taking the original mesh and using transfer maps within Maya or within Mudbox is a really powerful way to transfer that over and work with that texture data there as well. So let's move forward here and jump into a couple of different things within the viewport. We'll look at some UVs really quickly, and then we'll look at some viewport effects for visualizing your models in a very clean and kind of concise and nice way. So we'll go back over to our Sven, our hero character, and you'll see that with Sven, I have another little head simply lying beside him here, because what I want to do is take a look at some of the new UV layout tools that we've really put a lot of time and effort into within the Maya 2015 release. I'm going to bring up a UV texture window in here, and I'm going to grab this head. You'll notice that this head actually has no texture data. It has no UV coordinates. So let's just focus this guy in and address that. A way that we can simply do that, we'll go to Create UVs. And the nice thing about the new UV tools, just put UVs on it. Don't necessarily worry about how you're projecting it, because we can deal with this in a very effective way now within the texture, the UV editor. So if I go to my planar mapping, I'm just going to do this straight on. We're working down the Z or Z axis, and we're projecting it onto there. So we'll just simply project that on. And then what I'm going to do, we'll just accept that. I'm going to grab, I'm just simply going to grab an edge at the top of the head here. So we'll grab an edge here, and we'll grab an edge on the back. And this is where I'm going to cut to open up that, this mesh, this head, to spread that out. And then if I go down to my cut UV edges, we'll just switch over to UVs. And now I select this. So this is a key point here. Anyone that's worked with UV editing before the Unfold 3D algorithm within Maya this is where it got a little painful, a little clunky, took a lot of time, there's a lot of finessing, there might be some heavy drinking that might happen as a result of that finessing. So now underneath polygons, if we go down, you'll see that we have a couple of things highlighted in here. The unfold algorithm, all I've done, remember, is just simply put a planar Z projection on there, and then I'm using the unfold 3D algorithm. I'm just going to leave it at iterations of 1 just to do this quickly. We'll apply and close, and now we have a pretty decent, simple UV unfold. Really quick, really simple. The higher the iterations, the cleaner, the more unfoldy it's going to become for me. But now here's an interesting way to work with this. I've got my unfold on here, but now I'm going to go in and put a texture on that. But then I'm going to notice my UV problems. Well, before we even get to a texture, we can deal with a couple of different things here. We have this distortion shader. If I turn that on within the UV editor, this is going to show me a few interesting things here. So the white is showing me kind of the most ideal situation. The blue is showing me compressed areas, areas that the UV coordinates are compressed. And the red is showing me areas that we're looking at stretched UV, non-uniform stretched areas. And the nice thing about this is I can preview this as well outside in the viewport, and I can see those areas. His ears might be a bit of a problem, different things like that. So now if we go, if I turn off that shader there and we put on our texture shader, this is going to show me that as a checkered, so our guy here, this is going to show me, I can see that distortion. These checkers are not uniform across the surface. Not a big deal. We can address that. The cool thing also about this, you'll notice this checkered pattern that I've turned on in the viewport. This has been a big request we've had to handle different ways of working with multiple UV tiles, so that this checker area is going to show you your tile layout. You know, how many people have worked in here with multi-UV tile layouts and you don't know where U2 or V1 and you get lost, you get confused. All of this is going to lay that out for you in a simple map. I should point out, we're going to look at this in a second, the different ways we can work with multiple UV tiles. So we can work with multiple UV tiles kind of in the 1 algorithm coming from Mudbox, the 0 coming from ZBrush, and we also handle UDIM if you're working with other products, for example, Mari for your painting workflow. So within this, I've selected all the UVs on this mesh, and what I want to do now is just quickly optimize that. So we saw some compression issues in there. If I just dial in, I'm going to use the optimize UVs. I'll use our new Unfold 3D method in here, and then I can just apply and close. And it's just done some subtle little addressing on there. So if I undo that and redo that, you can see that it's just doing some subtle kind of making this a little more uniform as we work with this. So what I want to do now, we talked about some multi-UVs. Let's take a look at how we can handle, what formats we can handle within the Maya workflow here. So I'm just going to turn off that head. Oh, I don't want that guy on there. So into my attribute editor, here's Sven's body. I'm just going to look at this really quickly in the way that we can deal with multiple UV tiles, and now into our viewport as well, so that we can deal with different viewport effects or nice kind of clean rendering or model visualization, some things that we can tweak and adjust and kind of get into this kind of viewport rendering mode. So UV tiling mode, I mentioned that just really quickly, ZBrush, Mudbox, UDIM, or explicit tiles. So we have many different options in here. If you're working with a big data set of multiple UV tiles, a red button is going to be here and you're going to have to generate each of those previews, but you don't have to do it one by one. This is where we get into our Viewport 2.0 options. And whenever you're working with Viewport 2.0, you definitely want to dig into these options here. They're simple, but they're powerful. And the idea behind this is that if I'm working with multiple UV tiles, for example, I can go down here and regenerate all UV tile preview textures with one click. So I don't have to go through my entire shader network, my entire texture network. I can just regenerate all those UV tile textures in there. I can also clamp the texture resolution within my viewport. So it doesn't matter if I'm working with 16K textures, 32K textures. I can clamp them and display locked down at a lower resolution. So in this case, all my textures, I've clamped them all down to 4K so that we can view it this way. Down below, the bake resolution for unsupported texture types. This is an interesting tip here. Viewport 2.0 fully supports Ptex files. So if I'm working, for example, Ptex files from Mudbox to Maya, we can render those within the Maya viewport. If you work with Ptex files and bring them in the Maya viewport, right away by default, they look garbled and super low res. And that's because by default, the resolution for that is at 64 by 64. So just a tip if you're working with that, crank this up to a resolution, maybe it's 2K, 4K, 8K, whatever it is that you want to configure or view that in the viewport, and simply hit rebake all textures and you're Ptex files will look nice and beautiful. So while we're in the viewport, let's take a look at some of the different effects that we can work with. I'm just going to minimize this window. Underneath the preferences, this is something that we've added to Maya 2015 extension release. In the preferences, you'll notice under settings we have this new color management tab. Now I have that enabled right now in my viewport. By default it is not enabled, and we're going to take a look at the difference and how that works. So in the viewport we now have this nifty little area to control things like exposure, gamma, and how I want to work with the gamma or the overall color management within the scene. So we have all these different default preset settings in here that allow us to dial in different things that are related to your production rendering workflow. So we're bringing our color management or our color viewing more in tune with your actual rendering workflow within your pipeline. This little button here, if I click that off, this is without color management. This was all the textures in here without color management. I want to color manage this and turn that on. And then if I hold down the control key, I can dial in some of the gamma. We can get that into something that we want to work with there, maybe around that area. And then exposure, I can just simply drag and adjust the exposure in my scene. But back in the viewport settings now, we have another few things here. Some filters for working with visualizing your models as you go. So here we have Sven. He has some nice live shadows going on. But let's turn on screen space ambient occlusion. And that just kind of makes everything pop a little more, adds a little more detail to the scene, gives a little more ambient occlusion around all of the different pieces of the geometry. If I have animation in the scene, I can click on motion blur so that we can enable motion blur live within the viewport as well. And then anti-aliasing, I have this on at a lower level. If I turn, let's just kind of zoom in a bit on Sven here. I'm not sure how well this will display on that screen, but with it off, we're getting a little bit of jagged edges around everything. But if I turn it on, and then maybe we can crank it right up to something like 16, we're going to end up getting very clean multi-sampling within the viewport there as well. So that actually brings me to a close here. I'm going to leave it at that. I think we have just we have 3 minutes left here. I'm going to wrap it up on this. If anyone has any questions, I'll be around before the next session here. If you haven't checked out Maya 2015 extension yet, we were starting to release it now, please check out the videos that we've put online, check out some of the information around there, and check out why you should be on subscription and why you should be getting the extension. The different components and things that we provide to our subscription customers are definitely nice for a modeling workflow. Thank you.